Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Sonictalk episode 766, recorded today on the 9th of the 8th, 2023, where in the UK, there is a bit of sun, but it's not been great, I must admit. We seem to have had, after that initial beast of a few weeks in June, it's just been rubbish, which I know this isn't a weather podcast. It's actually a music technology podcast, but it's nice to see a bit of weather in the summer when you can have it. But anyway, it's all over the place. So first of all, I want to say thank you very much to our friends in the IRC, particular shout out to Wagyu, who's as ever doing a great job of moderating and also keeping the machinery working behind the scenes that allows us to have the cross-posting from IRC, YouTube, and Discord. Actually, I should probably do this. I haven't plugged the Discord for ages. Discord, if you want to join our Discord, bit.ly/Sonic Discord. I realise I haven't been saying, I've seen it's a little bit quiet because I haven't actually invited anybody probably for several months. So that's probably why. So if you want to join us there, please do. It's jolly good fun. There's all sorts of things. In fact, there's a great thread there. We did a mid-journey bot, which and Steve Elbows has just been posting tons and tons of really sort of weird, but quite impressive synth stuff with Hieronymus Bosch influences, puppets, balloons, nuns, all kind of stuff. So if you want to see that, check it out, but also have a go, because you could just describe it and it'll do it for yourself. Incidentally, what we're going to do is make a collection of some of those pieces of art, and hopefully we'll bring them in as a slideshow in our upcoming Sonic EMOM, which is, as I say, let me see if I can find it. I think if I press this button here, it'll probably post the fact that it's, oh yeah, coming up. That's probably not it. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's, there we go. That's it, EMOM dates. So yeah, please do join us. bit.ly Sonic EMOM 3. We've got 7 live acts. It's going to be really good. We've got Boo, Battery Operated Orchestra, Finley Shakespeare, which is a real coup. I was listening to some of his stuff earlier, really good, as well as 5 other really good acts, which I will be posting gradually on Facebook and various others, so you can check them out. But do join us in person. That's Friday, September the 8th in Bath. Obviously, there will be a live stream as well, but if you can make it, please do come along. It makes the vibe in the room all that much better. And I also want to do just a quick plug for our Patreon, because as ever, it's always appreciated when you can support us, particularly in these ad-lean times. I will just press a button and it should show up right now. Hey, why not consider joining us on Patreon? We've been a bit more active recently. We've got a couple of recent posts. I posted a preview of the Soma Terror, which we've got in for review. If you have any questions there, you can leave them on the comments on Patreon. Also posted first of our 360 camera walkarounds from the recent Gearfest UK show. Not only that, but you'll also get ad-free content of everything that we post monetized to YouTube. You get access to the Sonictalk pre-show. You get samples and exclusive videos, some audio stuff as well, and if you post before the end of the show, you'll get your name in lights. That's assuming you go for the upper tier, which is $6 a month, which is barely anything really. Anyway, thank you very much for consideration, and for those of you who already support us, we appreciate it, and for those of you who are considering supporting us, thanks again in advance. Back to the show. Before I do it straight back, one thing we're going to try, which will be Patreon exclusive, is from the EMOM, we're going to use an Insta360 camera. We're going to have that over the set, so you can watch the Insta360 version and sort of pan around and see what you like to see. So well worth checking out if you are considering it. Right, okay, so on to our guests. Look who it is. It's Mr. Steve Hillier from songwriting, DJing, dubstar, all kinds of stuff. How are you doing, Steve?
Hi, Nick. Yeah, I'm good. I'm very pleased to be back. I've been out of the country for a while, and I'm just looking at the video feed actually on the screen here, and I've realised that I've got the same problem in my new studio as I had in the old one, which is that all this daylight is great, but it looks like
godlight,
godlike or Oppenheimer-like. It depends on your mood. And I was just thinking, I was preparing this room for this show earlier, and I was thinking, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about this, but I remembered that in this old house when we moved in the loft, there were blackouts from World War II. The house is that old. For every window in the front of this house, not in the back, and also, unfortunately, not for this room. So maybe we should have moved. But it was a fascinating thing to find something from World War II in your new home.
I imagine.
There we go. So I've been good, thanks.
So, excellent. So you've been in Europe, I guess. Were you in the sort of in the furnace? Because it's been very, very hot there. Did you have did you manage to
Almost.
survive?
Well, I was working down in Spain and then in Germany, in the sort of East Germany near Dresden, and so I missed the very worst of it. But then the final night that I did out in that part of the world was in Prague. Got into Prague, and it was something like 37 degrees. And this was sort of late afternoon in the shade, so that was really horrible. But what made it worse, and I didn't realise that this is apparently a regular thing in Prague now, but there was a shortage of water. The water mains were shut off in Prague. So turn up. I don't mind admitting, from Germany, slightly hungover, trying to get your act together in sweltering heat and no water. It's not much fun. But to be fair, I'm not comparing that to what's been going on in Italy and now Portugal. It was this is
Just your own little taste of Well,
yeah, just the taste.
Well, there's always salt and vinegar crisps and Coca-Cola when you have a hangover. That sometimes helps, you know. I mean, depends whether you go that way or not. Or bananas, I'm told, are very good too. But yeah, you know, I'm sure everybody has their own way of getting over it. Anyway, lovely to have you, Steve. And we also have Mr. Gaz Williams, who's there in his Bristol studio, where he's masterminding his own streaming empire with Gaz Williams Show and bass playing, music technology. And you did a gig with Steve Davis on the roof in Cardiff. How did that go? I meant to ask. Well, I did ask, but I didn't get an answer. So I'm hoping it didn't tip down the rain, because it has been kind of that, hasn't it?
No, it was great. The weather was great. So we got to play on the rooftop. And yeah, it was really good fun. It was a slightly different for me and Steve to be playing to just a sort of very regular punter kind of crowd. Well, I say regular punters, you know.
People who weren't into modular.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we went down a little different route than we've done before, which was where I was handling some more drums and Steve was doing pretty much everything else. And that was quite good. It was quite cool because we haven't actually ever had those designated roles before.
Right.
So we sort of took it a little bit more sort of BT, you know, for because we were kind of given the headline slot, which was a little bit awkward in a way because we wanted to, you know, I don't know what we do is necessarily for that kind of role, but no, but we did it. It was good, actually. It was good, and we and so I was giving him a clock, and that was the only thing that we had in common was just a single clock. So I was in control of tempos, and then we had 4 tempos that we decided on, and then essentially it was just navigating through the different tempos. And yeah, it was really fun, and definitely want to do more. But I think the next time maybe just change up the roles a little bit. But I think I've enjoyed not having roles with the stuff I've been doing with Steve. But this time, as I say, just as a bit of a compromise, we're doing that. But there is something I'd like that I would like to mention that's not connected to that just before we get going. It's just something that I'm finding fascinating, and I think it might be quite interesting for some for some of you out there, which is there's a thing that happens called Mix Challenge, and it's the website is mix-challenge.com, and this month's Mix Challenge is actually a song of mine, or rather my band Rocket Gold Star. It's a song that we used for the Sonicstate review for the Steinberg AXR4 interface.
Okay.
And so we re-recorded a song for that review. So I've used the stems from that mix and have supplied them for this Mix Challenge. And it's quite fascinating. I'm very close to that song. I sing lead vocals on it, and I also sort of mixed it as well. So to get other people's version of the mix, find quite interesting. Also, part of taking part in this challenge stipulates that you're meant to give kind of a little report about what you've done to the mix in terms of what plugins you've used and the like. I should mention that it's running until the first round. It goes through various tiers of rounds, and people get eliminated as it goes through. It's like as a competition. I think there's some prizes, some plugins prizes and stuff. But 21st of August would be the date for the submission, final submission.
Oh, right, okay. So
round.
Get cracking.
Get cracking. But mix mixchallenge.com is the website.
Yeah, I posted that in. I think it's gone into the comments.
Oh, thank you.
I was just reflecting on what it would be like when you were talking earlier about the whole concept of sort of being in the headline slot and playing to a more mainstream audience. Did you have that kind of like, what would people come up and ask you to play if they weren't totally on board with that? And I just thought that it had to be Snooker Loopy Nuts a Wee, really. But I wonder, did you get any of that?
And it has been suggested at times.
Oh.
But it's a billion miles away from that. But just wanted to finish off on about that mix challenge, though, just because what's quite interesting to me is when I see how other people approach mixing, my own strategy is to use as little signal processing as I can, but I do use lots of like volume automation. So I'd sooner use some volume automation than a compressor if you're using the compressor just to kind of get certain elements up front. But I think there's been 9 submissions, 9 different mixes that have already been uploaded so far, and I'm just sort of I find it quite amusing to see how many plugins people are using. So
just out of curiosity, is it a mix challenge rather than a remix challenge? So it's not like kind of adding drums and beats, and it's just a different take on the mix of it.
At mixchallenge.com, they do other challenges. They do like mastering challenges and indeed remix challenges. And I'd love this one actually to be remixed, but no, this is strictly a mix challenge. So what you have to do is take those stems, and it's trying to simulate or give people an experience of what like a professional mix situation could in fact be, where there's a specific requirement of the client, and I think they use the demo as or the mix rather that I'd done as a kind of guide.
But surely for that to work, you have to give them some very poorly recorded drums, stuff that needs fixing, the sort of thing that, how on earth do you get it to sound good from this nonsense? You know, I mean, I'm not saying that's what you would normally do, but that's generally a kind of what might happen in a mix.
Yeah, some of the previous mix challenges I think have been more challenging in that way, where I think this particular one, everything's recorded to a pretty high standard.
I realise that.
But I think what makes this particular mix challenge a little different from some of the previous ones is that the song is a multi-part epic, so with a kind of almost like a narrative thread through it. So in order to mix it accurately is to kind of get into that narrative. And so I'm like assessing the mixes, and I think I'm going to be involved in the judging side of it. You know, I'm again, as I say, I'm very, very close to the song, but what I'm interested in is which mix kind of delivers that narrative the best, really. So yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, not too late if anyone wants to take part.
Okay,
if not,
mix-challenge.com. Go ahead, or don't, or
thanks.
But
I think it's interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I haven't. I'm trying to think the last time I mixed. I mean, me mixing, I find quite challenging, or have done, but I think it's primarily because I've just had such rubbish speakers for such a long time, or a poor listening environment that I couldn't trust. I'd like to try, because I bought some new, I spoke about it before, I bought those little IK Multimedia MTMs, the desktop ones, and it's such a drastic improvement to what I had previously, even though they were sort of reasonably good quality Genelecs, they just weren't. The environment that they're in is not, they needed to be in a better treated environment. These sound much more useful in the environment that I currently have, which isn't a treated environment. So I'd be interested to see. I mean, I don't profess I would be able to do a good job, but it sounds like good fun anyway. So yeah, excellent. Well, I'm glad are you streaming tonight, Gaz?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
I wasn't planning to, but as soon as you asked, I will. Yeah.
Well, this is a question from Di Stanton, who said, "Is Gaz streaming? Is Gaz live tonight?" Which is very kind of him, but it didn't show up until today, which was a couple of weeks ago. So I asked the question, he gets the plug. Everybody's happy. So hopefully that's all fine. Anyway, well, let's crack on. We do have some topics, though. Again, it's that sort of slightly bereft time of the year. I should point out, yes, did I say about our EMOM? You should definitely check that out. That's coming along soon, so do buy some tickets. Unfortunately, reviews are a little bit thin on the ground because I broke my wrist and I can't really play keyboards. Or indeed, it's quite hard to mouse because I need to, with the mouse, you need to bend your wrist up a little bit like that, and I can't do that in this cast. So I'm sort of a bit, I'm a bit challenged in that department, which is a shame. Anyway, let's get on to. I did find some topics. Let's start with this one, Nick, because it's kind of interesting. I'll play a little bit because I expect we'll get busted for it because we always do whenever I play other people's videos. This is
more than 23,000
the tech
songs
behind Shazam
every minute in the world.
This is the Wall Street Journal video.
How does it identify the music around you after recording just seconds of audio?
This is quite interesting because of the way that they
Shazam
do
has
it.
to
So
create a unique audio fingerprint of what you're hearing and then search its database for a matching fingerprint. That means simplifying sound to a bunch of data that can be processed incredibly fast.
Right, I'll leave it there because they then go on to explain. But the thing that was really, because Shazam's been around for a while. I remember when you used to ring it up and, hold your phone up and it would work. But what I didn't realise was that it was collecting all this, just basically taking spectrographs. I guess it would have to be the entire song. And then there would be key points between sort of energy levels and timing peaks in between things. And it would just store those data points like plots in a graph rather than the entire spectrograph. And then look for those similarities in whatever, because you might be playing any part of that song when you do the Shazam. And I just thought it was really fascinating. And it opens up a whole world of new stuff because, as we know, Apple bought Shazam. And so they made all of their digital catalogue, which is millions of songs available and can all be Shazammed as well. So I just thought it was really interesting, just that general technology. I know, Steve, last time we spoke to you, you were exploring the idea of AI and machine learning and things, that you could use in your sort of day-to-day work. And this sort of is quite an early example of that whole thing, which is, I guess, pattern matching rather than, it's sort of algorithmic search, I suppose. But it's quite an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's absolutely extraordinary, and I would recommend everybody to watch this video because, especially if you're, interested in computers and that kind of thing, because the approach is extraordinarily clever, especially when you consider that they mentioned in the video that this approach has been around now for 20 years and with some refinements along the way, but essentially they got the approach correct right from, pretty much the get-go. So, I use Shazam a lot in my DJ work because, as you can imagine, if you're traveling around a lot or you're just out and about at gigs and that kind of thing, you're inevitably going to be hearing music that you don't know. So just tag it in Shazam and you've got a record of the record, so to speak, which you can then incorporate into your own work, somewhere down the line. So that's been really useful for me. One thing that I saw, I was reading about a few weeks ago, and unfortunately I couldn't find the original article, but it's a new version of this kind of music recognition software. It's AI driven, that kind of thing. But it actually can spot components within a song, which really interested me and kind of got me a little bit scared, right? Because with Shazam, when you Shazam a song, it gives you one answer, doesn't it? It tells you the name of the song and it gives you the artist. So that's great. You can add it to your Spotify or Apple playlist. Brilliant. But this other AI, it was able to spot components within a mix that may have been from somewhere else. So, for example, anybody out there remembers... Exactly. If you remember the early 90s, there were a lot of tiny little bits from other people's records that were ending up in very, very successful mixes that were probably never identified, or maybe it wasn't worth pursuing back in the day. But
Yikes.
What the makers of this AI were saying was that they could actually identify these even if you're just using like a couple of seconds of a drum loop or whatever it is, and give a sort of positive result from essentially what we would call Shazamming that tune. So that got me scared. But then I spoke to...
Are they thinking of applying it retrospectively?
Well, I don't know. I don't think the intention of this was to cause trouble for all of us 90s musicians. I think it was more just demonstrating the accuracy and the ability to spot just tiny snippets within a mix. but that'll be fascinating once I can remember what AI that actually was. It wasn't the Google one; it was a slightly different one. But yeah, fascinating times for music recognition, and of course, it's absolutely brilliant for music discovery. You know, it's I've been privileged enough to stay in some rather nice places when I was touring around in Europe, and just hearing what DJs are playing from Eastern Europe, or in one case from North Africa, and then having that now in my record collection because of technology like Shazam. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, Gaz? I mean, I don't know. It feels like it could be used for good. I mean, because, you know, there's been a long time coming that we've been trying to figure out a way to sort of attach the metadata. One part of this, they were interviewing the CEO, I forget the guy's name, but he said right at the beginning, they said they hired a load of teenagers to manually type in the metadata for all of this stuff. But this actually brings up a more interesting point. I mean, I imagine the Apple stuff is doing a slightly better job if it exists of that metadata, but I mean this is something that could be useful in terms of, oh yeah, Gaz William played bass on that record, you know, he needs to get 20 pence for that synth that, you know, maybe whatever, you know, these things are possibly more useful, you know, would be other useful ways of it. And I imagine the YouTube copyright algorithm is probably doing something very similar, I would have thought.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah. I mean, this makes a lot of sense. This little video. I think one of the things that really surprised me though is that Shazam has been around since 2002, and how you originally had to do it was you'd have to phone this number, hold up your phone when they answered it, play it, and then they would text you what it was.
Yeah,
that's how it originally worked, which I thought was quite antiquated and funny considering
quite
the
quaint,
technology.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. It's been with us for such a long time now.
It's like a verb, isn't it?
Yeah, to Shazam. It absolutely is. I'm always a bit cautious. So sometimes I like a guilty Shazam. Like I really don't like the song that's playing, but I got to know what it is. And then I'm already conscious that if I've Shazammed it, it's going to go into my playlist.
Gaz likes this. We noticed you love this kind of music. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's true.
We play a game at home where we just, me and my wife, where we just, we count down and then we shout a word and the other one shouts another word. We say, hey, Bibby, you know, the name.
Hey, smart speaker, yes.
Hey, smart speaker, say one word and then they say the other word and then see what you get. And, you know, more often than not, it's really poor rap that you get the result. But sometimes it comes up with something quite good. Like a few days ago, we had was it the psychedelic porn crumpets came up as a result. And the song was really good. So, but it's just a silly little game and totally off topic. Sorry.
I think that sounds like a really good party game for two at very least. Yeah, that sounds like fun. Only because I think that's the thing. I mean, I used to do that with my Amazon speaker, but ever since, I don't know what happened. I'm sure when I was paying for Prime, I got Amazon Music, and now suddenly I'm not getting Amazon Music, and I'm not allowed to play any music I want. I have to pay something extra on top of that to get Amazon Music, which I think is pretty poor, actually.
Yeah.
But, you know.
I think that's the way they get you, Nick. But one thing I wanted to mention about Shazam, which I don't know whether this is widely known, and it was something that I used a little bit a while ago now, but you can actually go to Shazam and you can buy or have access to the data of where your songs are being Shazammed.
Oh,
and
right.
when.
Okay. Interesting.
Well, and of course, this is actually where it was a huge revenue driver for the company, is my understanding. And you can see this is incredibly valuable. If you're launching a new, let's say, pop artist, and you want them to tour in the States, but you don't have the budget to do the whole States because, you know, who does these days? But you can see, this tune is blowing up in Portland, and it's going down really well in Seattle. Not so much in LA, but they're loving it in San Francisco. Now you can do a West Coast tour based on Shazam data.
Okay,
and
interesting.
It was absolutely invaluable. at least when I was
presumably it must be the same for Spotify as well, isn't it? Because they map the kind of where people drop in and out, and it's a very disturbing set of circumstances, isn't it? Because they count a play, and then actually what a play is intro. That's why everything gets front loaded, because people only listen for sort of 30 seconds, generally speaking. So you put the whole thing in, and then suddenly, right, okay, I'll listen to the rest of the song, even though it's like the trailer for the film, isn't it? If you see all the beasts and the monsters and the surprises in the trailer, you think, well, there's not really much point in watching that because I've seen all the surprises. So yeah, it's the same sort of effect. But yeah, very valid point. Interesting stuff. Okay, I'm just going to play a little message from our friends over at UVI. Discover the Effects Bundle by UVI, a value-packed collection including UVI's entire classic effects line: Shade, Plate, Spark Verb, Dual Delay X, Relayer, Rotary, Phaser, Taurus, Drum Replacer, and the all-new Opal, a modern emulation of the iconic optical compressor, including stunningly accurate models of 7 different units. UVI effects are crafted to the highest standards, delivering versatile, high-quality sound shaping tools powered by advanced DSP. Introductory offer currently available. Learn more at bit.ly/UVI FX23. That's bit.ly/UVI FX23. And once again, we thank our new supporters of the podcast. Very much appreciated. Always nice to see a new kid on the block, as it were. Well, not that UVI are. They've been around for ages and well worth checking out their stuff. Anyway, thanks, and we'll get back to it now. Right. Okay. What's next? Let's see. I'm just trying to see what other. Oh yeah. This is very much, because we're in the summer. It feels like it's very much a kind of a time for those perennial evergreen topics rather than stuff that's actually in the news at the moment, because there is no news, frankly. Very little news anyway, or at least there is some news, but it's from a company I really don't feel like supporting at the moment, so I'm not going to. So let's do this one. So yeah, this is I was searching Reddit, actually, this is on Reddit Synthesizers. This is the best free gifted item that you have, and this was from Mashed Taters. This was gifted by a friend. I think that looks like one of those Moog Radio Shack products. I can't remember exactly which one it is. That MG1. Okay, good shout there. And I wonder whether or not this is something that you've had. I'm going to go first, because I was thinking, what have I actually been getting? And I do remember when we first had some modicum success, there was a chap in Bath who's a children's author, and he was quite well off, and he just really liked hanging out with us and the sort of scene we were doing, which was sort of clubs and remixes and stuff. And he gave me his Yamaha CS15. So I've got to say that's probably my best one. I have had it fixed. I know Kent Spong had a look at it, but I thought I would go there first. I know, Gaz, I'm sure you must have been, and I mean, this isn't necessarily the sort of the freebie because you are who you are. This is just sort of random act of kindness, perhaps. I don't know. Have you got anything that you'd like to put forward?
I think it has to be my first bass guitar, really, given to me by a school teacher, Mr. Jeff Griffiths. So Jeff, thank you so much. It was a K precision bass copy with a missing tuner, and that was about as most influential thing as I've probably ever had in life in many ways, because that set me off on a bassy sort of path, which has defined my entire life, really. So I mean, that I can't think of anything that was more significant to me than that. So I'll choose that, I think.
That's a great, that's good. Well, it's got a good sort of a good kind of fairy tale element to it as well. So we always like those. Steve, how about you?
I've got a similar story to Gaz, actually, in the early 90s, I was doing some stuff at a recording studio in a place called Wall's End in Newcastle, and I was given, I can't remember why, and I don't remember who it was who gave it to me, but they gave me an Atari ST 1024 with a black and white monitor, and I didn't know what I would use this for, but I thought, it's free stuff, give it to me. my only experience of an Atari prior to this had been the old 8-bit consoles, with the cartridges, with Space Invader and that kind of thing from 10 years earlier. So I was initially a bit disappointed that this was, first of all, it's a monochrome screen. But then I realised, hang on, there's MIDI sockets around the side. And I remember spending a week, or maybe thereabouts, trying to get something to come out of the MIDI sockets and not realising, you'd have to have some specialised software for that. Anyway, so I got hold of Cubase in the way that people got hold of Cubase in the early 90s. And that started me off, and really on the path that's taken me all the way to now. It was the Atari ST with Cubase and putting together sequences in those days, no audio, just MIDI, in a computer. And it was revolutionary because prior to that, I'd been putting everything together in a Roland W30 sampler sequencer, which was great fun.
As many people were, yeah. Many people were using that as well.
Yeah. But it was so clunky and buggy. Go to the Atari and do the sequencing on that. One of the things that I noticed immediately was that the timing on the Atari was just so much better. It had that really solid sound that you can still hear in records from, really from the 90s until the very late 90s, where things started to be put in the box, so to speak. So that was the thing, that was the gift to me that led me to where we are now. So thank you very much, Neat Records, and I'm so sorry you could never release all those recordings you made with Sting, but there you go.
Well, that's great, excellent. Well, I thought that we would get some tales out of this, so thank you very much. At least it wasn't a tumbleweed moment as well. So, as I say, summer is a coming. Summer is a here. Apparently, I'm not sure it was, but thanks, Mashed Taters, for that Reddit. I've started putting lists together of Reddit communities just in case we end up in a situation where there's very little else. I did actually completely overlook one of the topics, which is completely not anything to do with which it falls in the pocket of current news, so I should probably play that now. And this is this one. And I did a Fun Friday with it because I missed the deadline because I couldn't do a review because of my broken wrist, which you can see in the. I just put some loops together, and this is the new IK Multimedia Uno Synth Pro X, which is kind of the Uno Synth Pro, but with some knobs on, and a few other things. It's got an extra an extra envelope, some additional modes. They've tweaked the. What have they tweaked? They've tweaked the effects algorithms a little bit as well. And you watch that one. But so that's new. It's out. It's around about 510-ish, which does seem kind of. I think it's a little bit more than the original desktop, because I remember the Unisynth Pro. Was it the Unisynth? Yeah, the Unisynth Pro was really reasonably priced, and I thought it was an absolute bug because the Pro, even though it didn't have a great UI, some of the sounds, and this applies to the same thing. Some of the sounds here are really nice, and because you've got dedicated controls, it makes it all a bit more immediate. But somehow there's something about the fact that now you can get all the parameters, the sounds feel sort of slightly less deserved because it's too easy. It's easier to find. I don't know whether I'm being just kind of, but it's an interesting synth because a lot of the presets while they're good, they don't give away. There's lots of little nooks and crannies and corners and just little points between filters which are really quite unique to this instrument. And it's still got the same oscillator wave bleed and a couple of other sort of issues, but it's definitely got something about it. I don't know, Steve, did you ever get a chance to play with one of these? Because it's
no,
possibly
I'm afraid not. No, but I did. I am certainly interested in this unit. It might be precisely what I need for live, which might be something we'll talk about a little bit later. What intrigues me particularly about this synth is the dual filter configuration, where you can have one as a high pass filter, resonant filter, that's key, and one as a low pass filter, much like my MS-20 over there. One of the things that you can do if you're especially tweaking in a live situation is that if you have one filter set to high pass, one set to low pass, both of them pretty resonant, you can create sort of moving vowel sounds, which are kind of difficult to do unless you've got a format filter or something like that. But you can create some really quite extraordinary sounds that way. And it reminded me a little bit of my old Korg Prophecy, which was, again, a 90s thing. I'm sorry to talk so much about the 90s today, but it was a analog modeling synth for the 90s, and that had a particular preset that had dual filters, one high pass, one low pass, both resonant, that you could open and close to create vowel sounds. And if this unit can do that, well, that's certainly going to be a reason for me to purchase it. It does sound great for videos.
I will check, actually. I mean, the two filters are slightly different. There's the second filter is more of a screaming. I don't know what the actual spec is, but the right hand filter, I call it, is more of a screaming resonance, whereas the left hand filter is a less so. And I don't know whether it's a 2 or 4 pole thing. I'll have to look into that. I am going to get around to reviewing certainly the new features of it. But I know, Gaz, I mean, again, I don't think I mean, it seems like a no brainer for you. Little desktop synth with a lot of beef. It seems just. There must be room in your studio for something like this, right?
Ooh, there's no room left in here now. But yeah, I came really close to getting the original Pro non-X one, because they were being really discounted, weren't they? I just saw in the comments, Inky got one for 183, which
that's a bargain.
Bargain for sure. So of course, at like around the 500 mark, there's a lot more competition, and I think, did she mention that's around the same price as the Roland SH4D, which is a kind of comparable form factor, although quite a different, quite a lot more
voices.
Yeah. I mean, and a full digital synth as opposed to an analog synth that we're dealing with here, but form factor wise, they've got some comparisons. I do think it's quite interesting that sort of IK must have just kind of realized that membrane way of interfacing no one really liked, and it was certainly the thing that put me off it, because I thought the sound was great. I just the interface was. Are you talking about the Uno synth? Definitely had membrane. I'm not sure if the Uno synth Pro was.
Oh, yeah, really? But not the. Okay, but I didn't know if it was.
And the keyboard. And incidentally, there isn't going to be, or there hasn't been announced as yet, a keyboard version of this Pro X, where there was a keyboard version of the previous one. And I was thinking a keyboard version of this would actually be really nice. However, I was kind of looking at this and thinking about it in terms of what you get for your money, and certainly if you compare it to Eurorack, you get an awful lot, of a proper analog synth. And there's some real heritage, isn't there, as well, in the, was it Eric Nordlander? Was he involved in?
No, yeah, he was a little bit. I mean, it's Della, who's Enrico Della, I can't remember his full name. Lovely guy. I think he was involved in it as well. Enrico, yeah. And I think the first one was it was surprisingly massive sounding, I think. But I agree. I mean, when you're getting into 500-600 quid, you're talking about polyphony. This has got 3-voice para, not polyphony. And so you're talking, Minilog XD, in that kind of world. Well, so you really are up against it a bit.
But a few years ago, 10 years ago maybe, the analog nature of it would be a huge selling point. But we've been inundated with analog over the last 10 years. So that isn't such a kind of novelty now, albeit, brilliant that it is, but at the same time, it's, I think we're past that a little bit now, aren't we? I think market-wise.
Maybe so. Anyway, I wanted to put that out there. I mean, I will be having a look at it in more detail. There was a comment that just came in via Failed Muso, who was on last week. Unos didn't have membranes. They were both capacitive touch surfaces, apparently. So I don't know if it's the same thing. So it's less. But yeah, I mean, it's still the same. It feels kind of the same. But I think membranes have a sort of a rather bad rep because they wear out and they don't. But I don't think this had that, as I said. So just to clear that up.
From when I had a go of it originally, it was something that didn't appeal to me. This one way more appealing in that respect. But I mean, quite a big price hike though. So yeah.
Well, as everything is really, everything kind of is. I mean, that's the thing, I suppose. But there's not a great deal of other change apart from more interface. So yeah, we'll see. I think the desktop was around about £385, £400. previous, to the Pro, Synth Pro. So this one is a little bit more expensive, but I guess things are more expensive to a degree. Okay, let's have a look. There's I'll just have another mention from our friends over at iZotope because they've got some great tutorials.
Transient shaping sounds complicated, but is it? I wanted to explore this powerful music production technique that sometimes gets forgotten about. With transient shaping, you're able to shape and process your sounds, and there are plenty of situations where you're better off reaching for a transient shaper first, even over EQ and compression. This simple but effective sculpting method is great to keep on hand in your mixing workflow.
iZotope have a whole bunch of excellent tutorials just like this on their YouTube channel. To get a discount on their software tools, go to iZotope.com/Sonictalk and use the code SONIC10 to save 10% at checkout. Once again, we thank them very much for the support of the show. Back to you. Yes, I got my levels a bit better this week, actually well worth checking out. There are a number of really good tutorials just on how to sort of deal with bass, how to deal with all sorts of stuff there, which obviously they provide their tools that are ideal for the job, but you can save 10% on those as well through us. Anyway, thanks for listening. Okay, right. I guess Oops Live has got to be the next one, hasn't it, really? Because we've probably all got a story or two for this one. I can see Steve clutching his face. Okay, here we go. This is a Rick James with a DX7. Don't know where the gig is. He changed patches and it was the wrong one. So Oops Live, and I just thought this again is a great one I found on Reddit. Thanks very much for that post. It's like one of those moments, isn't it? I mean, they handled it pretty well. There's just something about the fact that he's wearing a kind of 80s leather balloon sleeve top and playing a DX7 that makes it all the more sort of funny somehow. But but we've all been there, haven't we? I mean, there are always these moments where you're just going, oh my goodness. And I suppose the thing is that it's how you respond to these things. I mean, Steve, I'm going to come to you first because you look like you have maybe a traumatic memory to share with us. I'm not sure if that's the case. I mean, you've just done a load of gigs. Anything like that happen while you were on the road this time?
I've been DJing around. And when I was preparing to come on today, I wrote, just make a few notes, and I've got a list here. Right, do I talk about the sequencer speeding up and I couldn't stop it? Is there the Dubstar story in Italy? I don't know. I think actually the story I want to mention, which I think is the most extraordinary story of all, is it's a DJing story. And funnily enough, I've already mentioned a place called Wallsend. So Wallsend is a kind of a satellite town, maybe, or a suburb of Newcastle upon Tyne. And when I first moved up there, which was in the late 80s, I got involved with an agent up there for DJs, and he got me in a couple of pubs, but he wanted me to come and do a wedding that was in his hometown, which was Wallsend, in a pub. So I didn't really know what to expect. What I didn't expect was to show up at this wedding in a room above a pub and the atmosphere to be like electric, but not in a good way. You had one family lined up one side of the pub and another family lined up the other side. So immediately, and I've actually been in situations where I've been DJing and massive fights have kicked up. I thought, well, okay, look, what I'll do here is I'll just put on some nice records, we'll make it nice. And back in those days, I was doing a little bit of work on the microphone as well. So, I'll bring these people together and all be sweetness and light. So set up the gear. Everything's going pretty much okay. But of course, by this time, everyone's drinking a bit. Introduce the bride and groom, get them to do their first dance. And as they're dancing, you've got this huge noise over the PA. And it was something like, Davey, get down to Shields Road. You got to pick up in 10 minutes. It was basically, there was a cab office directly next door to the pub, and every time they were getting on to the mic to talk to the drivers, it was coming out from my PA. So you can imagine I've got like nearly 100 already angry Geordies now looking at me thinking, and I'm thinking, wow,
You're
they're going to
making
turn
it
on me.
worse.
It's going to ruin the night. What on earth do I do? Now, 30 years on, I would know what to do. But right then, all I could think of was just, well, maybe can I turn it down? Whatever. What actually rescued me in this situation, because throughout the night, the taxi drivers were coming through on the PA, was something was said and there was a massive fight. Windows were put out, glasses. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible situation. But luckily, being Wallsend, the police actually showed up within minutes. And the first place that they went to was the taxi office, which they immediately closed. So I actually had about 5 minutes of music that wasn't being interrupted by the taxi office before the police came in, shut everything down, and sent everybody home. So what I've learned from that is that you have to be careful on a night out at Wallsend, especially 30 years ago, and just watch out for huge radio transmitters when you're using unshielded PAs.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Yeah, I don't know if I've had that one, but that, yeah, because I can imagine. I mean, imagine if you got that in somewhere on a system, say, Glastonbury scale, where it's like thousands of watts of taxi. that would be, yeah. But I guess that's what they have systems engineers for. Gaz, I'm sure you have at least one, if not more. I mean, which you've probably already shared with us as well. But there are some on there. Yeah.
Well, I have shared this one before, but it's too good. I think if you don't mind, I might tell it again. But this one, in terms of something going wrong, is about as embarrassing as possible. My band Rocket Gold Star, we were the first band to ever do the silent disco thing. We're the inventors of it, and I say that with a certain amount of confidence because certainly nothing like that had ever happened to our knowledge at the time. This was back in the year 2000. And we were using, Roland helped us actually, and they supplied us sort of newly released V drums and various bits and bobs and also arranged with Sennheiser to provide all of the headphones, which were all wired. And it was quite a logistic nightmare doing it. We had 100 for an audience of 100. So the first, as far as we were aware, it was the first proper concert carried out over, like a rock concert carried out over headphones. We are in the Wikipedia entry for silent disco for any of you who doubt my words. Well, who don't doubt the words of Wikipedia. But I mean, now there's been other claims. There's various other things that have happened in the past, but I don't think anything quite as complete as our first. And we called it silent gig as opposed to silent disco. And then the silent gig. This was May in the year 2000, and we'd signed a record deal fairly recent to that, and we were looking at trying to come up with some ideas for publicity. And this one really caught the attention of a lot of media, and we had a phenomenal turnout. So we were doing two shows. One was a press show, and then one was a public show. So it was during the press show that my blooper happened, and basically, there was, this thing was a new idea. So everyone was kind of really unsure how it was going to go, not least us. So we opened the concert with this song. It's actually, my band Rocket Gold Star was named after a song of ours called Rocket Gold Star. That's what came first. And we were playing the song Rocket Gold Star. And it had this elongated intro that we did just to try and really build up the atmosphere. And in that particular song, it all comes crashing in the chorus with a big vocal and the drums and the bass all enter at the same time with this big dramatic moment. And we sort of really milked this intro. They were using that new RSS thing at the time, which could enable virtual panning in headphones. But the problem was that the band had exactly the same mix as the audience, so you try to play as your part is being panned around you. So anyway, we're building up to the big moment, to the big, this big moment when it all comes in like that. And it goes, Rocket Gold Star. And on the star is where it all comes in, pow, like that. So I go, Rocket Gold. And I'm quite animated when I play live. And I just go and do this big step forward on that star and immediately stepped on the cable and pulled my headphones out, leaving me absolutely deaf at the critical moment. And it was like, if your lead comes out in a gig and you got the microphone, you can still do it. But in this case, this was like, this captured the, it was just at that moment. And it was horrific because then, I'm fumbling and trying to get the cable back in, and it's no good. And it's so embarrassing. It's so awful. It's like the worst. It was like the worst possible thing that could have happened. But, and I know that in your initial question, it was like, how do we get, what did you do to recover from it? In this particular case, it meant that we had to just stop the song. And apologize, get the headphones plugged back in, and then start again. And, and the kind of the embarrassment and the, all the confidence you build up for this big event. And, it's been covered by major news sources, BBC and I think Enemy and Melody Maker. There were a load of them there. And I think, well, what happened though, because of the clearly embarrassing situation and then starting again, something happens, and that's that the audience have some sympathy for you. And the weirdness of everyone being on headphones and in this kind of unusual situation, people, they come on side then. It's like
they didn't speak of it.
This kind of human incident then sort of humanized it. Maybe it was a little bit impersonal with the headphones on, and then this happened. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just kind of trying to spin it so it wasn't such a horrible disaster. But then it went really great after that, and was and it was widely lauded as a groundbreaking event or whatever. But just at the time it happened, it was just about as worst thing.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's
utter silence. Utter silence.
There's this problem. There's this problem for performers, isn't there, where you make a mistake or something goes wrong, and you have to determine in a split second: do I pretend everything's fine, or do I admit that this is clearly not right, and kind of kind of accept that my trousers are down at this point, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And I was remembering I had a gig over in Bath, funnily enough, about a year ago. And I was, again, DJing. And for some reason, I decided I have a laptop on a spare, and I decided to use my spare at the last moment. And something to do with the controller and the laptop didn't work. So much like you guys were going on with your big moment, first big song, boom. The pitch control had set to something like -50. So the song was playing at half speed, but it wasn't like half speed like with vinyl where it would slow down in pitch. It was like time stretched. So it just sounded absolutely bloody awful. Consequently, all I could do was slowly fade down the tune and have a quick chat with the audience. No mic or anything. There was about 500 people in the room just shouting, I suppose, just saying, yeah, this is terrible. It's all gone wrong. Bear with me a couple of minutes. And they did. And of course, when I was able to play again, everyone's on your side. It's like you've kind of shown that you're a person, with them in this room, and we're all in it together, really. Yeah. And so it was a great night after all.
Oh, that's good. I'm trying to think. I mean, the only thing that got from my personal, as the first time I played live, actually, when Gaz taught me into doing our first sort of, it was like an EMOM, I suppose, all those years ago back at the Salt Cafe, and I spent ages preparing, and it was like this ridiculous amount of effort got into basically a 15-minute set, and it went on, and I was practicing, and I did all these sort of things, and I had a Behringer XR80, and I was trying to figure out how to make it all work with program changes and stuff, and I set myself up, and I was ready to go, and then none of the MIDI worked, and it was just like, it was a delay of about 10 or 15 minutes. And with a set, when you've got all of these, you've got we were up against it time-wise because you're doing so many things. Same with the EMOM, we try not to, we've got a certain amount of leeway, but after a point, it's like we can't really hold up any longer. But what was really bizarre is because it felt, I thought, because I thought that I would suffer quite badly from sort of stage fright and nerves, and I really didn't, and I haven't since, and I haven't, done quite a lot of things recently which have required, public speaking in difficult situations or whatever, and I get into this sort of weird Zen-like state, and I just go, well, I'll just have to sort it out, and it'll be all right, and it was all right in the end, but it was, and I think I could feel the audience in that situation sort of willing it to come together, and it sort of did, and it was all right in the end, and I think that's part of the thing. As we are musicians, or as we perform in any sphere, some people rehearse and get it down and have everything prepared. Some people just leave it to chance. But I think if you prepare, the more you've done it and the more prepared you are, kind of the better you are at dealing with it when it goes wrong, because your entire being is not focused on, oh my goodness, it's all gone totally wrong. You just kind of go, you have to just go, well, maybe I can go this way instead. But you have to have a bit of experience to be able to pull on that, or be just very fortunate to be able to ad lib and do this. I mean, you could do that, Gaz. I mean, I don't think, but I think that, sometimes technology can let you down in such a massive way that there's no recovering. In that clip, Rick James was just about to play keyboards. It wasn't like the intro or the moment. It just sounded like he pressed on the wrong program, and it sounded like a bell patch rather than a piano patch, which, could have been worse. Could have been just solo voice and him at the beginning of the quiet bit of the show in a state. There are things that but you could, like you say, if you involve the audience, go, hold on, let's do that again. That didn't work out, did it? And you can make light of it, and people kind of go, oh, that's great. We were there for that. It makes it real. And I know, Gaz, you're very keen on live being live, so in many ways it's an affirmation of that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that live thing, when it includes the sort of it includes the things that go wrong, it's really an important part of it. A lot of these shows, which are all super backing track kind of based, I mean, and they've got their redundancy systems. It's like almost like nothing that can go wrong. I think it just makes for, a less interesting, exciting event. But
yeah, it can do. It depends.
A whole new topic.
I think it depends what the purpose of the gig is, I suppose. But I totally with you. Okay, right. Go, Steve. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to mention something about in terms of gigs going wrong. Something that didn't happen to me, but I witnessed, which I thought was funny and touching and kind of lovely. I saw Nick Kershaw play a gig, and it was up in Newcastle, a place called Gateshead, actually, the place called Sage, and he was using a looping pedal and an acoustic guitar for one tune, and it was one of the big songs. All the people in the crowd were singing along, and he played into the looper. It was about halfway through, played in a new thing, and he got it wrong. And it was a brown note at the end of this little phrase that he was playing. And it just went round and round and
forever
round.
And ever and ever.
And you could see at first, you could see that the audience at first was sort of like, this isn't how this song goes. What's this? Are we doing jazz? But of course, by the end, you could see that Nick himself was well aware that this was completely terrible. But he struggled to the end, and of course, got a big cheer. And I think he said something along the lines of, well, the thing with loopers, if you get it wrong once, it's wrong all the way through. And like, yeah, wouldn't it be good? Now do that one next. Come on, Nick. It was a great moment.
I'm feeling sorry for the audience being repeatedly exposed to a brown note. I mean, kind of quite awful repercussions.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, that was I just thought that's another one of those evergreen ones. What else have we got? I think maybe I won't go for the shouting at clouds pop music simplistic debate, but I might just go for a quick world's longest electronic music set. Oh no, that's not it. That's this. This is Ryan Zonefeld. Recently, he at the Karen Mar Festival, he began his set at 12:49 p.m. and ended on the stroke of midnight, making it the set 11 hours and 11 minutes long. And he basically. It was a Guinness World Record. There's a photo. See if I can find the photo. The photo is hilarious because basically it's. Let me see if I can get that up there. There's a picture of him. Okay, this is all rather. There's actually. Let me see if I can find the article because there's a picture of the poor person from him. Let's see if I can find it. This was from EDM.com. Let me find. There's a picture of the lady from that's him doing his thing, and then there's a picture of the poor lady who'd obviously been from the Guinness Book of Records, who had to. Let's see if I can make that any bigger. Who basically had to stay there for 11 hours and then hand him his certificate. But apparently, EDM is quite big on breaking records in terms of longevity, long sets, and whatnot. I don't know. Is there? I mean. Which is interesting. I mean, we're obviously, again, it brings me back to my ideal set length for EMOM, which is 15 minutes, 5 acts coming. And don't forget to check us out on the 8th of September. But what is the ideal length? I mean, because, you can do, it's like films that are just 20 minutes too long. There is a sort of a natural point. I mean, one would hope that one would know when to go, when to drop it, and that's one of the skills of building a live set, isn't it? Is you take it up and then you just go, right, that's it. We stop at the high point. We don't go, oh no, actually I'll play a few more, and then you sort of got to build that dynamic all over again. It's quite, I imagine that's quite difficult. I mean, you do lots of live sets, and I know with the various bands that you're in, you do you decide on the day? I mean, do you sort of look at the venue and go, yeah, this is only a 20-minute set, or this is, or what there's a skill to it. You don't want to go too long because you might alienate you.
Well, funnily enough, that was something very much on our minds on the gig that we did last Friday, trying to gauge how long we played for. Around 35 minutes, I think, in the end, which isn't very long, but was probably just right for that particular situation. So yeah, it is a weird one to try and gauge it. I play some weddings with one of the bands. We do wedding gigs, and you have to be prepared with a wedding gig sometimes to play for another hour longer than what you were asked for, just if circumstances and those kind of things go that way. I just have to say though, that back when we did that
oops,
excuse me,
something fell.
That was one of the oops. That was one of the blackouts coming down. Sorry, Gaz, go on.
Phew, that's all right. Phew, it wasn't
wasn't like a microphone crashed into a sledge or anything like that.
No, fortunately not.
So back in that May 2000, we did that silent gig. On the 1st of May, we actually we recorded our first single. I've talked about this before, but it was 12 hours long, and we played that entirely for 12 hours. So 11 hours DJing, try playing live instrument music, singing, creating songs, making up verses and choruses on the fly for 12 hours. Yeah. Stick that in your mind.
Were the audience still with you by the end, or were they still there?
It wasn't really audience as such. We did have quite a few people in there. We had someone from the NME, bless them, who was in there for quite a lot of it. I think they couldn't quite take the entire time. But yeah.
12 hours, fair play to you.
Yeah, so I'm thinking 11 hours of an EDM is like nothing. It's absolute piffle compared to what we did. So yeah.
You could just have a really, really, really slow filter open that went for like 3 or 4 hours around a 1-bar riff, and then slow it down again, and then closing it down again, Steve, and then you just end that would be 3 or 4 hours done.
I just use Paul's what's it called? Paul's time stretch. Just
that's live
single note for 12 hours. Yeah.
Well, speaking as a fellow DJ, 11 hours, yeah, that's really easy. That is not the same as making music. I've recently done a lot of very long sets, and yeah, you're tired at the end of it, but you're only tired because you've kind of been on your feet and you've had to choose which record to put on and in which order. It's really not the same as making music. What do I think is the optimum length of a set? I think it's just too short, just slightly too short.
Yeah.
I think it's leaving the audience wishing that you'd gone on. It's obviously not outstaying your welcome, but I think there's the fine balance between being just slightly too short and annoying people that they didn't get their money's worth. But yes. Yeah, I one of my favorite gigs of all time, and it was just before the pandemic, was an American band called Cigarettes After Sex, which for some reason I always mention on this podcast. And they played for exactly 1 hour, and they played 2 songs on an encore, and it was perfect. And I think, for a paying act in a big London venue, that I wouldn't want for anymore. I don't want to be, hanging around for 2 hours having watched Taylor Swift on a screen from half a mile away. That would disappoint me. But an hour in the Shepherd's Bush Empire with a seat next to the bar, perfect.
Perfect. What's really interesting is because, I mean, bands who've only got one album or not even that yet are going to struggle to do more than 35, 40 minutes unless they're going to do some covers and whatnot. And the same for, unless they've got a lot of material that they haven't previously recorded, which is sometimes the case, but not always. And the same goes with, any stuff. I mean, I suppose with modular things as well, the thing that's quite hard, I mean, it's quite hard to build a dynamic thing, because you're limited to a degree by the patch you create. I mean, Colin Benders can do it, but I mean, he plays regularly for hours and hours and hours, but he's a maniac.
Well,
but that's quite hard.
I went to see Underworld fairly recently, doing a warm-up show before they played at the Albert Hall. And something that they were doing really struck with me, and that was that they create like a false ceiling of like the maximum dynamic. And one of the things that Underworld are masters for is taking their time to get, they take their time to build things. So they build what you think is the full intensity. And then every so often it would go up and like another level of kick would happen. And it would just seem like, that headroom that they've established, boom, they keep in a certain amount of it for these moments. But then, and unlike what a lot of DJs do, who typically, and not you, Steve, I know, but lots of DJs just cranking the whole, cranking it into the red for the entire time. So like Underworld could do this thing, and it felt like, I don't know how many extra decibels they had on tap there, but it was so thrilling when they would use that. But they also had the wherewithal to not stay up there for very long and to sort of bring it back down and then re-establish that other, that level again, so they've always got that little pocket that they can just dip into at times. And I don't think I've ever seen another electronic act kind of utilize that technique as beautifully as
that's partly to do with the amount of noise you can expose an audience to. You're not. I remember I was interviewing. I can't remember his name. Rob, the guy, he does Massive Attack, and he was saying the thing is that what you have to do when you're playing these large venues, you're only allowed to be at this level for a certain amount of time. Then you have to drop it down. You have to save it up. So it's a lot of it's also to do with the front of house engineer, because it's like, okay, you reach 103 dB, whatever it may be, and you can be there for 10 minutes and then you drop it down, and then you're not allowed to go above that for another X number of minutes. So the construction of the set is quite often built around the cadence of what you're allowed to expose the audience to. And then at the end, you've saved it up. So then you've got like 3 minutes or a minute of really, really loud, but then you stop before you trigger any health and safety things. And it's actually quite an interesting shape that you have to do. And very often, there are systems built into these PAs that will basically just turn you off. If you go too far, your history, you're done, because the venue can be fined, people can sue you for hearing. I mean, it's just it's quite a complicated thing, not particularly if you're using, like Underworld do, the full range and the full volume that they're allowed to achieve in any given venue. I mean, I imagine being there front of house, there's a lot of that going on, because in some venues you can probably go higher for a certain amount of time because of the architectural shape of the building, and others you can't. You have to kind of start quiet and get to a point which seems loud in context but isn't all that loud, so I think that stuff, it's a fascinating thing, the way that they have to do all of that. And it's all the systems tech is now integrated into this digital control of the amplifiers, so there's no escape. You can't blow it. I mean, well, you can, but if you do, something bad might happen, and you'll either get fined or the show will prematurely stop. So you've got to be very, very careful with that stuff. But yeah, interesting. Okay, well, I don't have an awful lot. There was a question. I think actually what I will do is I know we haven't done on very many user questions, and I do apologise for that, but I'll just grab. Oh, sorry, Steve, did you want to just come in there for a second?
Oh, no. Sorry, Nick. No, I was kind of just saying, I was sort of gesturing, yeah, go on.
Okay, right. I will do. I thought you had something to add. I do beg your pardon. So this is just a question, which is, it's from Rapscallion via IRC. What's the vetting process with the EMOM? Are you letting anyone with something to play? I will explain this because, in true EMOM sense, what tends to happen is, you would just open the venue, whoever turns up plays. We can't really do that because it costs us 450 quid to hire the venue, and if nobody turned up or they were all of a certain genre and it was just a bit samey or whatever, it would be very difficult. And also we're live streaming it. We want to make sure that we put on a show. The structure that we're doing is I book 2 headliners, and then you can submit to be a performer at the Sonic EMOM. If you just go bit.ly/Sonic Performer, there's a form you fill in, it's got all the information, then you go into the spreadsheet, and it's a list, and I will, as we go through, people who've played go back to the bottom of the list, and then we try and get other people, and there are various factors in there. Sometimes we've been trying to get Martin Christie to play for a while. He's got to come from a long way away, he hasn't been available, so it changes the way that you structure it. But I try and make it kind of not all 90s acid or not all weird ambient stuff or whatever. This one we've actually got in this instance Jack Monojack from Bleep Bloop, who is the guy who makes all the tape-based modules. Brilliant. He's playing, and that will be interesting. It might be challenging, but he's such a lovely guy with great energy. Whatever he does, I think people will just sort of embrace it. But there's some really good stuff, as there has been for the other ones. So there is. It's just we can't leave it to chance on the night, because there's what happens if loads of people said they were going to turn up, don't, because of traffic or because of whatever. You've really got to have a little bit of structure to it. But I mean, that this goes back to me being a bit of a prepper. I need to have everything sort of lined out. Also, we shoot videos of interview with people who are going to play, so we can play those in the intervals, because that's to cover the gaps in the live stream that we're changing over the set and stuff, for which keeps the live stream doing something interesting. So there's all sorts of reasons why it can't be just that, but we try and spread it out as much as possible, so everybody of all types and standards and experience get to have a go. That's the idea anyway. So I hope that answers that question. I suppose that doesn't really. I can't really throw it to you guys either, because you're not playing at it. But you're more than welcome. I know, Gaz, you'll be there, and hopefully Theo's going to be doing some visuals, and we've got some great plans for that. So that's going to be really good. So yeah, I'm still plugging it because I'm trying to sell more tickets, because the ticket sales have been a bit slower than usual, because we've not done one in the summer before, because I think people are still away. I mean, it'll be fine. It'll be great. But
I'd urge people to consider coming, though, because it is a really nice social event, and just sort of yeah, it's really good fun. And of course, there is that thing as well with electronic music, when it's loud and nicely mixed. Is Silas going to be doing the sound?
Yeah.
So having a quality person manning the sound makes for quite a thrilling. You can feel the audio. You don't get that if you watch it as a stream, unless you watch it through a really big sound system. But I don't know. That's just the physicality of being
in the room. There is an in the room aspect to it. Yeah, I would totally agree. Just see if there's any other. Let's have a look. There's a few other. I'll save those QQ questions, but do keep them coming. We will get to them again. I think we'll probably do a show where we'll just catch up on those. I do apologise, they haven't been ongoing, but that's just the way it goes. And Di Stanton, oh goodness me, Di is absolutely blinding it on the super chat. Thanks, Di. 20 English pounds for shits and giggles. Well, I'm going to say it out loud for that. I'll risk the bloop because it's very kind of you. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you to the chats and the IRC and everybody. Thanks to Wagyu for moderating and all those things. Sorry for those who got a slight break in transmission while we moved from local to cloud. There was just a bit of a capacity issue, which we've now fixed. So hopefully that'll all be all right. Steve, are you in the country for a little while now, or are you going to be off?
I'm off to France. I'm back off again, back to North France, back to Brittany next week, which I'm looking forward to. It's kind of in this time. It's going to be like a combination of a holiday and a little party in a city called Rennes, which I haven't been to in a very long time, but that should be kind of good. And then tonight, off to a town called Lewes, which is just next to Brighton, to watch Junior Mervyn and the Wailers do their reggae thing in a venue that might as well be a scout hall. It sounds exactly like my kind of thing. So if you're in Lewes, I'll see you there.
Great. Nice. That sounds great. Have a lovely evening. Gaz, did I ask you are you streaming tonight, or are you just taking a break?
Yeah, no, I will stream. I will stream. I think I've got an idea in front of me. I've got the Dreadbox Nymphess and the Arturia Keystep 37, and I was messing around with that yesterday. So I think I'll probably do something along those kind of lines, because the Nymphess is something that I've not really delved too deeply in, because having the...
It's a bit modal. Yeah, it's a little bit modal. There's in terms of some of the shift functions are a little bit quick. That's the only thing I would say.
I'm getting my head around that, but absolutely is a little bit of a drawback, because I mean, it is, after all, it is a very, very small little thing here. But it does sound good. It's really nice. Yeah. But I'm kind of curious as well about. I like small, travelable, portable devices, and I've got a little bag. I've shown that on my show that I take with me to parties and the like, so I can just whip it out and annoy people.
I think that there should be a Sir Mix-a-Lot version of "I like small synths and I cannot lie."
Yeah. So so I think I'll probably look at something like that. I think I'll be looking at the Nymphess. I'm gonna let's do that.
Okay, brilliant. That sounds like nice. That sounds really good. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, folks. Well, thanks. I don't think it would be a waste of time, but thank you very much. Thanks to everybody in the chat room. Thanks to everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Steve. Thanks to UVI and also to iZotope for sponsoring the show. See you next time. Take care. Bye-bye now.